So when we talk about autophagocytosis, we talk about fasting, the fancy name is autophagocytosis. It's really about this understanding that once you stop eating yourself to death, okay, your body gets to eat yourself back into health. So at the cell level, what's happening is hunger is very healing. And this is where a lot of people will have that thing. I'm famished. I'm starving. I haven't had any food in 3 hours. Oh, rescue me. Right. We go through these dramas that we do. No, you are hungry. And that's a good thing. You need to be hungry every day. You're not starving. Okay. Starving is a very different metabolic process in the body than just being hungry. Okay. So the thing we like to teach, Alexis, for everybody, and we have an art of fasting class coming out in the next week. We're hoping by next week it'll be out. The art of fasting will be ready to go at the school. What it does is it teaches you how to fast safely in different styles of fasting, from intermittent fasting to clinical water fasting. It teaches something very important, that you cannot do like juice fasting. There's no such thing. There's juice feasting. You can have a bunch of juice, and that's fantastic. Get a whole bunch of antioxidants. But the idea is this, folks, keep it real simple. Hunger is healing. So you need to be hungry every day. That's why intermittent fasting can be so effectual, because what intermittent fasting does, the way most people practice it, is that there's a 16-hour window from the time you last ate the day before until you eat again the next day. And what that 16 hours does, about 12 of those hours at least are really dedicated to digestion. So you're not actually in fasting state yet. But what it does enable you to do is get about 4 hours, the beginning early stages of autophagocytosis at the cell level. So you get about 4 hours of healing in there, especially when you've gotten that signal in that you're like, hey, I'm getting really hungry. It's like 16, we're getting close. When's that? You start looking at the clock. When's the 16 hours up? That's when you know your body's healing. So you need to give that to yourself every day. And it's a discipline thing, but it's a discipline thing that's going to pay dividends so much for this reason. That 4 hours adds up. So when you do it for a whole week, by the end of the week, 4 times 7 is 28. That's 28 hours of autophagocytosis you've given your cells of your body. So what you want to think of is autophagocytosis, that when you're hungry, your body is healing at the cell level. Your cells are literally getting rid of waste that's in the cell cytoplasm area, the cell's water. But there's something else going on, maybe not at that hour stamp, but you are setting the stage for nucleotide excision repair. Okay. Number one, if you haven't started doing intermittent fasting and you don't have Hashimoto's, okay, because Hashi's doesn't usually work. It works for about 2 weeks and then the person will collapse.
Interesting. That's a big problem for women my age.
Right. It's huge.
Menopausal women, we have massive thyroid issues.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Good
right. So with Hashi's, what happens, Alexis, that's really wild, is when folks that are trying to do, and there are some women that have Hashi's that do just fine on intermittent fasting, but clinically what I've seen is that when they start, like about 2 weeks, they'll be like, I'm feeling really good. And then they'll have a relapse with Hashi's. And I don't know if it's part of a healing mechanism or not, but I was like, it just seemed like we were forcing it at that point, of forcing a lifestyle. And I'm pretty much against force when we're talking about healing. You know, if you're forcing it, you're doing it wrong. Like, we have to kind of back off. So what we did was we took those women through 3-day clinical fasting. So what we did was we took them into the deeper fasting, where you actually get into peak levels of autophagocytosis. And that's where the nucleotide excision repair really happens. Okay, as you start stacking hours. So we did 3 days, 72-hour clinical water fast with them, and they did great. So women with Hashimoto's, you may not be able to, and a large percentage will not be able to do intermittent fasting, the 16 hours every day, for whatever reason. God knows why I don't. But can do fasting once a month still, can do a 3-day fast once a month, and say, okay, and to me, this is the new lifestyle we have to do. It's not just about eating organic foods anymore. It's about saying, I am definitely throughout my month either practicing intermittent fasting every day, or getting into, if I can't do that, 3 days of water fasting every month, or maybe both. Like, 'cause that's what I do. I'm like, I'm still going to take 3 days every month and be like, anything I didn't do, I'm going to let my body, like, hey, do your thing.
Yeah, I think Dr. Ricola does that as well. He does the intermittent fasting plus the 3 or 4 day fast every
Yeah,
month.
that would
Great.
explain his workload. He can get some stuff done.
That's what, yeah, that's what he says. He says he gets so much done. If that's your experience too, it's like you're like, oh, I didn't have to do all that shopping and cooking and eating. I saved myself so many hours.
You move slower. I would say, Alexis, the experience is generally like for people who are just learning how to do water fasting, like 3 days, you know, three day plus. Like, and the reason we do 3 days is because that's where you get to the peak autophagy, and you start to, you know, some people say autophagy. I don't. I say autophagy, and you get into this peak autophagocytosis experience at the cell level. You get into some nucleotide excision repair, and for the first probably 2 or 3 fasts a person does, it's just getting to the 72-hour mark is the win. You know, because a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm so tired, I'm so hungry, like the stomach is actually physically shrinking up, you know, so they're just like, just getting to 72 hours in the first couple is a win. But after you've done enough of them, like it becomes a lifestyle for you. It's you know, it's pretty much like, yeah, I can do a full work day. It's a lot slower. You really get this appreciation for just how slow life is meant to be and how fast we are living at. We always encourage people when they're fasting to stay off of their technology and stuff like that. But after you become a vet, you can get some more stuff done. So like I can get a lot of work done because it's amazing, Alexis, even when we're eating a restricted or responsible calorie diet, right? Like I eat 1 meal a day. That's it, you know? It's amazing how much time that takes. So you actually can get a lot done, you know? And I just think this is where we're heading as a society. For people who really want to be healthy, when we talk about eating healthy, of course, your foundation of your diet has to be organic, plant-based. I mean, I don't think if anybody that wants to debate that with me, I would love to. And I said plant-based. I didn't say vegan. I said plant-based.
Yeah, I was just about to pipe up that, you know, for my health, I switched from being a vegetarian for 30 years to being omnivore.
Right.
And I cut out, you know, I've read some books by, I think it's called The Dirt Cure, where the doctor who wrote that book is talking about carbitarians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wasn't vegan. I was vegetarian, eating a lot of carbs and dairy.
A lot of carbs.
Yeah, and so as an omnivore now, I'm eating a lot more fiber and protein.
Right. When we're doing fasting and we're accepting it into, you know, ourselves as a lifestyle, to me that's a huge plus. But I think I think the ultimate diet for most people, not everyone, right? We don't want to one size fits all. I think that's the worst thing going on in our world right now is one size fits all for everything. No, we do have a lot of biogenetic individuality, a ton. Like everybody's literally different.
Yeah, and we're just hopping from fad to fad.
Right.
And not looking at things holistically, like, oh, now I'm going to be a carnivore. Oh, wait, now I'm going to be a vegan. It's just
right.
fad. We're not really paying attention to ourselves and how things are impacting us or what's optimal.
Right. Like we talk to the keto and the paleo folks, and it's like, well, how clean is your meat? You know, and what's the impact? What's the global impact on, you know, that lifestyle, right? And then you know, I mean, it's not as bad as a big, you know, 500,000 pound earth mover that goes through 12,000 gallons every work shift. You know what I mean? Like, let's not kid ourselves, right? But it plays a role, and these are good questions for us to ask. You know, it's like I want to have a soft footprint on this planet. I want to be appreciative for everything that I've been given and give back, right? And I think most people feel like that. So it's like, well, we learn that. We learn how to do that. And I think what's really cool is when you get into a fasting lifestyle, you are doing that because you're cutting down your number of meals. So what you're giving as a gift to yourself is you're also giving as a gift to the planet because you're not consuming as much. You have to get to a 0 calorie state. Like autophagocytosis will not kick on at the cell level while the body is metabolizing any food. So the cell has to be done with that process of metabolizing, done with the process of protein and lipid assembly, and done with the process of moving waste out of the cell through the P450 cytochrome system, which is in every cell. That's your cells are built to poop. Think of P450 as that's your large intestine, okay, for the cell, right? And so, you know, when you look at it through that lens, the cell has to go through these things before it can get into autophagocytosis. So if let's say it just finished up, right? It just finished up the lipid and protein assembly. It's getting ready to start detoxifying and getting rid of the waste, right? Let's say that that's what's happening at the cell level. If you put another calorie in at that point, you start the process all over again. I got an image on this. Let me bring it up. Let's share. Let's stop talking theoretically. All right. Well, I'm going to take you back to this one. I want to show you, because those are the pictures I wanted to show some folks earlier. And as always, we disclaim that, yeah, this is not to replace the medical advice of your doctor or whatever. It's just education. So here it is right here. So what I wanted to show everybody was this. This is what's going on within a cell, right? So a cell, when it's just finished replicating itself, it'll go into what's called interphase. And during interphase, all right, getting ready for the next cell replication, these things take place. Nutrient absorption, provided that there are nutrients there. Energy production at the mitochondrial level, that's a little organelle within the cell. And then that energy that the mitochondria produce are used for enzyme production, all right? And those enzymes are used specifically for metabolizing what's come in. And then after that is gone down, then what goes on is lipid and protein assembly, because your cell is constantly working, right? This is what's so cool about cells. From the moment they are created, replicate, they go to work, you know? And then at the end, like we said, in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, that's where you get the colon, that's where you get rid of the waste. So the cell will go through these things, absorb nutrients, produce energy, produce enzymes to metabolize, build things, and then get rid of the waste. So far, so good, Alexis. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I wasn't great at science, so I'm learning all this for the first time. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty chill, right? It's not super complex, right? We even have over here some things that that you need nutrient-wise for each of those things. You know, we have some ideas over here. But then there's this sixth stage. And this sixth stage, what the cell likes to do is go into this sixth stage before it goes into the process of mitosis, of making a new cell. The reason it does autophagocytosis is so that it can clean up the inside of the cell as best as it can to create the healthiest version of the cell for that replication. Is that still good? Very
interesting.
Right? So this is the design. But when you are eating 3 times a day or snacking continuously throughout the day, what you're doing is never giving your body a chance to get into autophagocytosis, because it resets every single time you put new foods in. You're doing all of this stuff right here, right? Well, now you got to this point, and then right before this got done, you started eating again. So now you went right back up here and you start going through the line again. Does that make sense? So this is what most people are just doing. And then so cells will have to replicate, but they'll have to replicate having never gone into autophagocytosis for that final healing. And that's why it's so important to be hungry every day. Give yourselves a chance to replicate the healthiest version that cell can replicate itself as. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So simple stuff, right? So when we look at this, you know, there's the reason we are so adamant about organic plant-based foods, and now in clean water, and, you know, and breathing exercises and everything. And for me, you know, taking all the nutrients you need for these little mitochondria in here to produce energy. The reason we're so adamant about that is because when you eat something or inhale something, it gets into your bloodstream. We all know that, right? That's common knowledge. When it gets into your bloodstream, ultimately, when it gets down to the capillary level, you'll start getting those nutrients. And whatever you've put into this bloodstream will start seeping out here, Alexis, into the water around the cell. So far, so good?
Mm-hmm.
So it's neither good nor bad. It's just saying, hey, what do you want to, what you put in your body gets into the bloodstream, and what gets into the bloodstream ultimately gets into the environment around the cell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cells like to be in an environment at a specific pH, pH around 7.5 or a little bit higher. So if you're putting things in your body that are very acidic, what they're going to do is that water that it's being created with with any nutrients, or maybe it's not nutrients, maybe it's chemicals, right? Maybe it's you ate some fast food and the chemicals and the hormones and everything are in the bloodstream. That's what's going to be around the cell.
Mm-hmm.
So when whatever you eat is ultimately going to find its way into this water that surrounds your cell. Remember, your body is 66 to 75% water. So every cell is bathed in water. And when you're bringing nutrients and oxygen, hopefully, and organic foods, right, and the great polyphenols and bioflavonoids and quercetins and epigallocatechins and green teas and all this other stuff, that's what starts being around your cell. And what the cell will do is take all those nutrients and start to absorb them through this phospholipid bilayer. And when those nutrients get into the cell's water, that's that blue stuff right in here, if those nutrients are good, and if that pH that the cell is surrounded in is really healthy at 7.5 or above, something really cool happens. The cell starts being really happy. It starts working as it's designed to work. And when that occurs, cells' number one job is to heal. So cells get into a really advanced state of healing because you've created the environment for healing to happen. That's what your diet, that's what your lifestyle is. An environment for disease, or an environment, or creating an environment for healing to happen. Well, now when there's a lot of nutrients for the mitochondria to produce energy, they produce a lot of energy. And when they produce a lot of energy, that energy is used throughout the cell, including in the nucleus. That is used throughout the cell for these other organelles to do their job. So right here, you'll get the production of digestive enzymes. Right here at the ribosomes, you'll get the production of proteins. So this cell will make little protein structures. And over here, the cell will make proteins and fats. Okay. And then those proteins and fats will get packaged over here in the Golgi apparatus and then released from the cell if those things are required to be released, or just used by the cell to help repair and reinforce itself so it can continue doing its job, right? So all this happens without you needing to do anything. All you got to do is provide the building blocks, and the cell does the rest. Okay, that seems like there's some divinity in there to me.
Yeah, it's an amazing system. It's so interesting.
Right, and you have little lysosomes up here, right, Alexis? These are going to be instrumental during autophagocytosis. This is like the stomach of the cell. So when you have, say this is an autophagosome right here, a little bubble, and say it grabs on to something some waste that's in the cell that shouldn't be there. Well, now it grabs onto it and surrounds it. It'll carry it over to this lysosome, so whatever it grabbed onto gets digested. And then when that stuff gets broken down to its smallest components, usually single amino acids, it actually gets reused and recycled if it can. And if it can't, it gets packaged over here and pooped out into this water. So far, so good?
Yeah, no, this is a really good explanation.
Okay, and now you got all of this waste that's been pooped out. Some of it's gaseous, some of it's small molecule, some of it's large molecule. The gas and the small molecules will get brought back in through the veins down here, right? And now if they can go out, if they're small enough to be urinated out or exhaled, then they'll be exhaled or peed out or sweated out if you're sweating every day, which I hope everybody's getting into sweating, getting into some at least infrared sweating, infrared saunas or something like that. And now what you have is a way to keep this water around the cell very clean, because the cell, remember, is making waste too. So we want to get that out of there. The larger molecule, heavier waste, will go through the lymphatic system where the immune cells really hang out, right here. And what's perceiving this entire thing the entire time, this process? A nerve. And that's why we have the 4 vital tissues: arteries, veins, nerves, and lymph. And what are they all doing? They're all constantly working on this water around the cell. Now, the arteries can only give what you give them to give. So they can only, whatever you put in, that's what's going to come around here. So if you don't put in enough nutrients, and this cell is going to suffer. If you put in a bunch of chemicals, a bunch of alcohol, a bunch of drugs, that's what's going to be in this water around here disrupting the cell. And that includes pharmaceuticals. And then this, because you're putting in a lot of junk, the pH of this water is going to change into something that's very acidic. And that acid is going to start breaking down some of these fibers, these collagen fibers here, right? That acid is going to start breaking down the wall of the cell, that protective phospholipid bilayer. That water is now going to become this cell's water and everything in it. So if what is in here are heavy metals and cadmium and smoking and vaping and, you know, and alcohol and other chemicals and PEG and graphene oxide, what do you think is going into the cell? All of those things. And then what that does is, because it creates this as a very acidic and very acidic environment, the nerves perceive that, and that's why your body hurts. Because literally the cells are being damaged. That's what pain is. Your nerves monitoring that your cells are being damaged. So how do we change that? Change that by changing what we put in and improving how we get rid of the waste.
Wow, Dr. Ealy, that is beautiful.
Right? So there's your primer, everybody. We'll talk more about that, and as we get into future weeks and things like that, we'll build off of that visual. We'll keep coming back to that visual. But I think it's a good thing to understand, like, it all comes down to what's happening at the cell level. Mm-hmm. So what you're putting in your body, what your lifestyle is it's either supporting what's happening at the cell level, or it's supporting injury at the cell level, right? But the thing is, it's all up to you. You have complete control over this, because that's what freedom is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that is changing every day with everything that we eat or don't eat, or how we're living our lives, what we're doing, how we're feeling. And so there's just so much potential for renewal in that system. It's quite miraculous. It's
designed to heal itself. It's designed to replicate the healthiest version of itself every single time. And I think that's the message. If you can eat yourself to death, but hunger is healing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we got simple ways to keep all this super simple. So thanks for having me today. I can't wait to come on next week and do it again.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ealy. See you next week. Have a great one.
All right. Thanks, Alexis. Peace, everybody.